Pod. Welcome back to another episode of Say Who Say Pod. He's Danny O'Neil in a sports coat. I'm Christian Caple. Man about town, Danny O'Neil. Got all over the greater Seattle area over the weekend.
I did. I may need to shed the sports jacket. The sports jacket may not be long this morning. It's kind of muggy in New York. And yeah, I can already feel the schwitzing going on. Schwitzing, a Yiddish term for breaking into like that sheen of sweat that pops out. But yeah, I arrived on Thursday evening, departed on Sunday morning, and in between watched a spring game, saw some old friends, witnessed Washington's men's crew team reaffirm the results of the American Revolution, edging out the Brits in a thrilling finish to the Windermere Cup, and then went and watched the Mariners play a game that I've seen them play at least 1,400 times before.
Remind me which game that was.
Emerson Hancock striking out 14, taking a lead into the ninth, and then the suddenly shaky bullpen. Single, balk, single in the game-tying run.
There's been a couple already this year, but like that's a strong candidate for most brutal early season loss. That was a rough way to lose a baseball game.
It's pretty when your starting pitcher throws that well. You've got a ball that goes through the wickets of your center fielder. You've got your left fielder thinking a 2-2 pitch was a 3-2 pitch and jogging off the base with the bases loaded and getting picked off. Yeah, it was rough.
What was your vantage point for the Windermere Cup?
Windermere Cup, by the time the Windermere Cup happened, we were on the south side of the cut right at the finish line. So had I stayed in the position I was at up until the final two races, I would have been one of the only people that would have been able to tell you who won because I was really right at the finish line on the south side of the cut. And then we moved to a higher vantage point. So I have a pretty good video. I should post that. Nobody knew who won. Like, it was that close that nobody knew who won. It looked like the English were going to edge him at the end. And then, now that I've seen the drone footage of it, which, by the way, the University of Washington posted, drone footage is awesome for surfing and crew races. Absolutely unbeatable. And it looked like England pulled ahead, and then the Huskies got him at the end.
So what you're saying is you had to Paul Revere it a little bit as the only one who knew. You had to tell did you shout to everybody, they won?
No,
they won.
I sat there and waited
won.
for. I'm not so confident in my crew judgment. I had to wait until the coxswain from the UW men's 8 started splashing in the water.
That's fun. So you're saying it was similar to the way that the purple team celebrated on Friday night after their 27-10 victory over gold, which is really white.
Yeah, I had a thoroughly good evening. Some of it's the weather was so nice.
Great night, yeah.
Could not get a better evening. And I kind of liked MC Fishy Fish with Jed Fish taking the mic over the course of the game and interviewing people, talking to Damon, talking to the soccer coaches. I kind of dug it. I kind of liked it.
Could you understand all of that?
Maybe 3/4. Yeah, I think I understood most of it.
Because it's inaudible in the press box.
Yeah. I got the idea of what was going on. I knew who he was talking to.
Where were you sitting?
We were sitting in the north bleachers, section, I think 148. We were pretty close to midfield. Yeah, on the north, in the north stands.
Maybe there's parts of the stadium where because I feel like you can hear the PA clearly during games and such, but and during the spring game, like they were calling out yardages and everything, and I feel like that came through clear. But when they have someone else grab the mic, or when it's like the in-stadium DJ or host or whatever, I can never. It's just garbled to me. I can never make that out.
Yeah. Plus, you had corgi races, man.
Yeah. Repeat champion Gigi over Banana.
What's up, Gigi? Gigi was about business, too. In each of the semis, you had one corgi that was there and was not messing around.
Gigi was chomping at the bit, man. Gigi, they showed her on the screen, and you had that look in her eye. I was like, that's your winner right there.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I'd forgotten she also won last year. So, I mean, that's That might be worth a story. That corgi's got some training, man.
Do they just let anyone with a corgi enter? Like, if I had a corgi, could I enter?
I don't know. It's a good question. I did both of those corgis, Gigi and Banana, have their own Instagram pages and everything. So, like, this ain't their first rodeo.
Yeah. No, but I enjoyed the one challenge, and we were bringing this up. Some of it's because we're old men. Maybe we need to do like jersey numbers on the scoreboards for the spring game, because one of the challenges, obviously, there's a lot of new players, but even the returning players are wearing new numbers because there's so much turnover year to year. So I'm assuming someone like Alex McLaughlin, when he gets in, he doesn't get his choice. Now this year he gets his choice, so he picks a different number. It can be tough to get a lay of the land of who's who, even when you follow it fairly closely.
Well, you don't have to follow too closely to know there's been no turnover whatsoever at Chuck Olson Kia and Shoreline. In terms of being family owned and operated, and locally owned and operated since 1964 by a family of University of Washington graduates, with a friendly, low-pressure sales staff and a competitively priced selection of vehicles, we hope you'll make Chuck Olson Kia and Shoreline your next vehicle buying destination. When you do that, because I'm confident you will, ask for our friend Henry Olson, and when you talk to Henry, tell him Say Who Say Pod sent you. This episode of Say Who Say Pod also brought to you by our friends at Husky Mobile. Husky Mobile is partnered directly with the University of Washington to offer affordable phone plans for the Husky community with up to 7% of each bill going back to UW athletics. Subscribers can also enjoy game day perks like Fast Pass lanes, seat upgrades, and giveaways, all while on T-Mobile's nationwide 5G network. Use code ONMontlake at checkout to get your first month free when transferring your number. You can do that at gohuskymobile.com. Thanks again to Husky Mobile for supporting today's show. I've been cautioning people that even the coaching staff does not evaluate the spring game. Like, Jed Fish has said, I think in multiple interviews with us on Friday night, again, I think on KJR on, what was that, Tuesday morning, that like, this is not even, they don't even consider it a practice. It's like you have 14 spring practices, and then the spring game, I liken it to, you remember that like last Friday before winter break in school?
Yes.
Where the teachers kind of knew, like, you're not going to get any work done that day anyway. Your tests, if you're taking finals or whatever, like, they're out of the way. This is going to, a lot of times it was literally like the plan was to have a party.
Yeah.
The plan was like, here's a sign-up sheet. Here's who's going to bring cookies. Here's who's going to bring chips. Here's who's going to bring lemonade. Ooh, teachers might bring some pizza. We'll wheel in the big TV. We'll watch Frosty the Snowman or whatever. And, like, it'll just be a party today. It's just a celebration of, this phase of the school year is over, and we're going to have 2 weeks off and go enjoy Christmas and everything and come back.
Nobody's even pretending we're going to work. There's not even it's not even a ruse. The day has been conceded.
The spring game to me is sort of like that. It's not a perfect comparison, but it's sort of like that in the sense that, like, it's a celebration of this part of your season. It's a celebration of having, hey, like, you worked hard through these 14 practices. A bunch of guys got a bunch of reps. A bunch of guys got better. In Washington's case, like, you gave your fans something to look at because practices were open. And now here's one last chance for people to come out to the stadium and have a good time and tailgate and just be around the team and get a look at the team. I would caution against drawing any real firm conclusions from what you saw. Like, the teams were split up. You've got guys playing next to guys who they're not going to be playing next to each other during the season. You got a bunch of starters who didn't practice all spring because of injury. This was, I'll say, as game-like as probably anybody is doing anymore, but still not real football.
Hold on. Does this mean I need to rethink my take on Gavin Day for the 2026 season?
See, I don't know if you do. I think, put it this way. Feats of athleticism and playmaking, that's okay. That's okay to take away and say, like, oh, whoa, look at the way that freshman safety fired down to cut down that guy for no gain. You know, how about that? Like, that's real. But worrying about the quarterback missing a few throws or, this running back or that running back not looking as dynamic or whatever, like it's maybe pump the brakes a little bit.
It's my number one takeaway from getting out there is that number 5, Derek Coleman Brusa, if you did not know he's a freshman, you would not know he's a freshman. He fits in on the defensive line. He's a big dude on Washington's defensive line, even though he's 18 years old. And Cody Green at 76, very similar. They do not look like freshmen, or in this case, high school seniors, which is what they would be. But I definitely felt like all of those, like I found myself starting to try and look like, oh, where's number 11? I wanted to see how Jordan Clay was fitting in and what opportunities he was getting. And I kind of checked myself where I was like, it's tempting to do. It's tempting to try to project and imagine what this says about their playing time or their opportunities or their readiness for the fall. But that's really, you're just falling victim to, this is the one opportunity you get to see them, so you place an importance on it that is not generally there. That's not how the event itself is intended.
And it's tough because like they call it a game and they put it on TV, and so most people do not have the capacity, the flexibility in their schedule to come watch a football practice at 3:30 on a Tuesday, and or don't want to spend sunny spring Saturday in the Seattle area watching football practice. I get that. And so this is sort of, especially if you're out of the area, right? Like that's all off the table anyway. This is your chance to see them. This is, you are told like, hey, spring game broadcast is here. We're going to show you football. They're wearing pads. They're tackling each other. And so it's hard. It's hard to watch that in context, right? But then when you hear Jed Fish talk about it, he's like, oh yeah, I loved it because I didn't have to do anything. Like he's the play caller and he's not calling but for this game, he's not calling plays. You got Damon Williams with the walkie-talkie in the third quarter calling the offense, right? On a touchdown drive for Keeney McMillan. So maybe that's, hey, if we're doing spring game takeaways, like maybe Damon's a candidate for offensive coordinator. So I get it. It's televised football and you want it to mean something. But I think for the coaching staff, the previous 14 practices all meant more. Maybe the first 13. I want to say the last one was probably more of a walkthrough. But they did have 2 like full on days of 100+ play scrimmages. I'd say those are probably a little bit more meaningful at this point. But also like, hey, you mentioned Jordan Clay. Well, Jordan Clay didn't participate, right? Just like Chris Lawson didn't participate. Christian Moss was out most of the spring. Both Hatchett brothers were out pretty much the entire spring. You got starters on both sides of the ball who didn't get a ton of reps this spring. So you're not trying to win spring. You're just trying to get everybody better. I will say, like, I was putting together my story of 5 newcomers and 5 returners who stood out this spring, and I had a really hard time narrowing it down to 5 and 5. In fact, I cheated a little. It really wound up being more like 7 and 7. But there was a lot of opportunity for a lot of guys. They have almost their entire team on campus already, which we've talked about. Like, I think that makes a difference. A lot of freshmen got reps, where in the past those guys are kind of limited to scout team, most of them. There was a lot to look at, and I thought a lot of guys stood out and made plays. It appears to me to be a pretty talented team.
Now, I will say one thing that I do believe that you could project from the spring game is that if Isaiah Ward is someone who starts racking up sacks, you're going to see some creative dances from him. He appears to be someone who's willing to show out a little bit when it comes to the celebratory parts of the game. I enjoyed his dancing throughout the spring game.
So he had a good spring too. I thought he was impressive. He maybe missed a couple practices with like a minor, got dinged up a little bit. But another guy I'd put in that category is Ramzak Fruin.
Yeah.
So
also a number 11, right?
Yes. The 2 number 11s are both true freshmen who are probably going to play a bunch this year, and who are like similarly sized. Also, a receiver and an edge rusher. One, he's very disruptive good athlete, obviously is going to play. Coaches love him. They talk about him like, yep, this guy's, they see him, I think, as like just a cut below like the Cody Green, Derek Coleman Brusa tier. Like he was a 3-star for most of his recruitment, but by the end of the cycle, the way that Jed Fish talked about him, like they kind of saw him as like, hey, if there's anybody in this class of like really highly rated players we just signed who's not rated quite as highly, even though he wound up being a 4-star by the end of it, who we're like, we kind of see and who we sort of think should be, it's Ramzak Fruin. We saw that this spring, but more to your point about creative celebrations, he was on it from day one. There's like an arm flapping thing that I don't know if it's like a whole defense thing or if it's just his celebration and everyone else has picked up on it. I gotta get an explanation on that one. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but he seems to be the leader on that one.
Washington has a strong legacy of celebrations. I mean, in recent times, I kind of credit with Jabbar Muhammad with instigating the
box.
Drawing the box and 2 thumbs down, which has gone well beyond Washington. That's become a full-blown national and even into the NFL trend.
Did he really? Was he the one who started that? See the box pioneer?
Probably not. It's the first person I can remember seeing it, though. So according to my narrow perspective, he gets credit.
That was the same year that the seatbelt thing became widespread. The first time I saw it, I thought it was like a sword sheathing.
Yeah.
Which I don't know. I kind of think that's cooler. But the seatbelt thing probably makes more sense.
I don't know if we talked about this. The Vita Vea did a seatbelt celebration in the NFL this season on a play where he dropped into coverage and it was an incomplete pass.
I think I saw that.
And I don't know if he actually even got credit for a PBU, but he was in the vicinity and then he immediately applied the seatbelt, which I was like, that's the biggest person who's ever done the seatbelt celebration.
So I'm trying to remember the way that Ryan Walters talked about Washington's defense ahead of last season.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like he was pretty high. Everyone was worried about the D-line, right? And I feel like he was higher on their D-line personnel than most. Talked about like coming over from Purdue and like he was hired after they went through the whole portal cycle. He had no hand in putting the roster together at all last season. But talking about how like, wow, what a great job the personnel department did. We have bodies on hand that, the kind of bodies on hand that you need to compete in the Big Ten. Like this is what it should look like. And he spoke really highly of their depth on the D-line, which I think raised people's eyebrows a little bit because if there was anything people were worried about defensive personnel-wise last year, that was it. I'm contrasting it with the way he's talked about their defense this spring. And you can tell like he thinks the ceiling is higher, even if he hasn't said that straight away. And in some ways he kind of has suggested that, hey, my defense is historically like year 1 to year 2. It looks a lot better. The D-line again was the question mark. And I asked him after the spring game on Friday night, like personnel wise, was there anything that surprised you about this spring or like any area where you're stronger than maybe you expected? And he was like, well, like, I don't know if it was a surprise, but the question mark was the D-line just with so many new faces. And I was very optimistic. I was very hopeful that it would look the way it did, but he felt like that group even exceeded his expectations. And so this is somebody who I think has been higher on Washington's defensive line personnel than the public 2 years in a row now. And even he, I think, was impressed more so than what he was expecting by what he saw in the spring. And that would line up, I think, with sort of the neutral observer as well. I think between Alinius Davis, Derek Coleman Brusa, Deshaun Watts, Darren Conley, I mean, even, T.I. Umukais and Omar Khan got in there and they look like guys who can play, who can at least give you snaps. That's 6 guys. I'm going to be very interested to see what Kai McClendon looks like, the Mississippi State transfer, once he gets healthy. He's big. He's a big dude. And it's kind of fun watching him on the side do the hand fighting thing with Ben Kramer, their director of sports science. I think he's someone they feel like can help them too. J.D. Hill is one of the few true freshmen who isn't here yet. Whether he starts out on the edge or more inside, we'll see. All of a sudden, it's looking like they've they've got a lot of options there, and a number of them were pretty productive this spring.
That's a good sign. I do have a question about not so much their depth this year, because I do think they're deeper. I do have a question on who's going to be their best defensive lineman, who's going to be their best pass rusher, because I don't think that's clear. It's asking a lot to think that Derek Coleman-Brusa is going to be able to produce at that sort of level. Him just being able to be an adequate defensive lineman, him being an average Big Ten defensive lineman as a true freshman, in my mind, would be a remarkable, like that's really good. There is a part of me that holds out hope that you've got sort of that freak of freaks that can be better, could be one of your better defensive players, even as a true freshman playing up front. But I do wonder about that. What's the ceiling of their best player?
Yeah, I mean, on the interior, certainly I think they're hoping that's Elinius Davis,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what we saw this spring too. I think you saw a pretty nice jump from 2024 to 2025 for him, and now they're really looking to him to be that big time. Jed Fish talks about being a guy who can play 35 or 40 snaps a game at that position. It maybe it gets a little bit overlooked that their two starting edge rushers are both seniors, Isaiah Ward and Jacob Lane, who have just sort of been, Isaiah Ward was hurt last year a little bit, and I'm sure was disappointed by that and wants to have a healthy senior year and show what he can do. He's gotten bigger. He's put on some weight. Jacob Lane has just sort of been that steady guy for them. I feel like having two veterans at those spots sort of sets your floor. So now someone like Ramzak Fruin, Devin Hyde, Logan George, the transfer from Ohio State, who I was pretty impressed with, but he was also dinged up, wasn't able to practice, do team stuff every practice this spring. I would be curious to see him more in training camp. JD Hill, once he gets there in the summer, trying to think if I'm leaving anybody out there, probably I'm missing a guy or two, but you've having two seniors sort of at the head of that room now gives you an opportunity to see okay, well, let's see if someone like Ramzak Fruin, if someone like Devin Hyde, someone like Logan George, situationally can help elevate the ceiling and give you a little more burst and just being able to rotate 5 or 6 guys through too and keep everybody fresh.
It's a really good point about having experienced guys that are there starting, because it does open it up. The best situation for a younger player is to come in with a fairly narrow role. If Ramzak Fruin comes in situations where, hey, you're going to be in passing situations, we're going to send you in there to rush the passer. You're not going to have to worry as much about run gap fits, and what we're going to utilize you for. It does help guys, younger players especially, get their feet on the ground, as opposed to we really need someone who's going to be able to be an every down defensive end, because that is a much more difficult role.
In terms of projecting the starting lineup, it really feels like the only question marks right now are on offense. And there's not many, right? You know what you've got at quarterback. On the offensive line, it's going to be more about which of two guys ends up at right guard, rather than, hey, nobody's stepped up yet at this position, and you need the summer and training camp to figure it out, which is kind of the case at X receiver. I think they really liked what they got out of Rashid Williams on the outside at Z. I thought he had a really nice spring. I think he needs to be a guy for them this year. I think they know what they have in Desmond Roebuck in the slot. You saw his playmaking ability. Another guy that at this point, he's literally a sophomore. I mean, academic-wise, finishing his freshman year of college, yet kind of like John Mills, you already just sort of sort him aside, okay, yep, he's good, and he's just going to make his plays, and it's not even remarkable at this point. But at X, they didn't really get a great look at the candidates there. I mean, Trez Davis, who's a true freshman, who they also really like, he wound up getting a lot of reps there with the number one offense, which I don't think they were necessarily anticipating. Jordan Clay looked like he was probably the front runner, but then he gets hurt and misses like half the spring. Christian Moss, their transfer from Kennesaw State, I don't know if he went through one full practice before he got hurt. Bodpin Miller, who came over from Ohio State, I think he's still fairly new to the position. He played quarterback in high school, but he was dealing with something that kept him out for most of spring in terms of participating in team periods. I mentioned Chris Lawson earlier. Like those are all those guys who you're kind of looking at in that bigger receiver, stretch the field, be that alpha type X receiver down the field like Denzel Boston was. And you didn't really get a long look at him this spring. So that's going to be something to sort out in the summer.
This probably isn't the fairest way to look at it. I tend to feel that Washington's passing game, it's like, that's Jed Fish. Like, I'm not going to worry about, that's your job, Jed. Your job is to have your passing game firing. Like that, I don't want any, like, well, this guy got hurt. Figure it out. Which isn't, it's not the fairest, most mature or reasonable way to approach it, but it's very much how I think about things in my mind. I'm willing to cut you some slack on defensive line depth and wonder how, but that offense, the passing game better work. That's you.
They'll find somebody.
That's where your bread is buttered, Jed.
One of those guys will get healthy.
Don't tell me about the pain. Show me the baby.
Justice Williams got a lot of reps there too. But I think if they have a full complement, you're probably talking about 2 or 3 other guys who are going to get a lot more attention once you get into training camp in August.
The other thing is that Rashid Williams is someone that they were very high on a year ago and was really projected to be one of their main guys until the injury. And when that happens, you generally stop thinking about that player as a fan. And maybe in some respect, coaches do too for the season because that guy's not there to help them. But the idea of the following season, you look back, well, he was supposed to be a big deal last year, and he didn't really turn out to be. Injuries, nobody can prevent an injury. Like, nobody has any control over that. There's no reason to be any less optimistic about Rashid Williams this year than there was a year ago. In fact, you should be more optimistic because he's got more experience. But that's generally, at least for me as a fan, that's not the way my mind tends to work. So I try to make sure that I remind myself of, like, okay, a year ago you were excited about this guy. You should be just as excited, maybe more so, about him right now.
You could say there's like similar questions at running back, though maybe not quite to the same. Like, I legitimately don't know who the third starting receiver is going to be when they take the field. I have a pretty strong feeling that, like, I don't know about snap one because it depends on packages and stuff, but I'd be surprised if Quade Carr is not their leading rusher in their season opener, or does not lead the team in carries in their season opener, or does not emerge from training camp as RB1, so to speak. Now, you're getting 2 veterans back for camp in Jaden Lamar and Trey Cooley.
Mm-hmm.
And Jaden Lamar in particular, I assume will compete for those duties, or at least will be sort of your veteran floor setting third down back, probably the guy you trust most in pass protection, who's had a ton of experience in college football at a very high level, playing in very big games. But in terms of like explosiveness and, hey, this guy can like be a factor and really raise the ceiling for the offense. You get him the ball in space in the open field and everything. Like, that Quade Carr had a pretty good spring. And maybe this is reading between the lines a little too much. Like, it seemed like they backed off of him a little bit in terms of him getting hit and getting tackled to the ground. You didn't see that a ton. So I wonder if that was an acknowledgement that, like, hey, this might be your guy, especially in light of the injury to Jordan Washington, which, I mean, it doesn't sound like it's any sure thing that it certainly doesn't sound like they're necessarily relying on having him this year. I think it's like he was at the spring game, seems to be in good spirits. He is still wearing a neck brace. Sounds like it's going to be like July 1st, Jed Fish said, before they might know something a little bit more definitive about what his availability might be for the season. So it doesn't sound like they're counting on having him. And I think that probably has more signs pointing to Quade Carr. But Brian Bonner got a lot more turns this spring than they were probably expecting for the same reason. I thought in terms of like a goal line, like situational guy, I thought Ansu Sano had a good spring. I I thought he was a little bit more of a factor than I was expecting. He's huge. He ran over Zadrius Rainey-Saleh once. He ran over, I think it was Gavin Day once. Mm-hmm. He knows who he is and what he is as a running back. And I think that sort of short yardage role, like that's what you probably worried about really the most with, okay, Jonah Coleman was that guy who could get you a yard. Adam Mohammed physically is built that way too. Who's going to be the tough yardage guy? Who's going to be the guy who can grind out 2 yards on 3rd and 1? I wonder if Ansu Sano might have a role there at some point this year.
You also had Beck Walker have the run of the spring game, right?
Beck Walker rips off 26 yards. Who'd he bounce off of? Donovan Robinson?
Yeah.
But then Donovan Robinson rips a pick 6 away from him a couple plays later. So he got his revenge.
Yeah, Robinson looked pretty good. It was, I think one of the things I came away from is we spend so much time talking about the issues of college football for very good reason. The sport is in the midst of a huge transition. And I can, when I'm thinking about it, convince myself or feel like this is a sport that has undergone so much change that I don't recognize it. My school doesn't play in the conference I'd prefer it did, like all of these different things. Sitting there on Friday night next to 2 guys that I've known for 30 years that I met when I went to the University of Washington and watching the team play and trying to figure out who's who and being in that stadium on a gorgeous spring night. It might be an instance of heart over head, but you feel like, yeah, man, it's still really fun to root for this team. I don't have less investment in it. I'll make some cracks about the nature of the game and how things have changed, but it was fun to get excited about Gavin Day, the safety from Nevada, who I really will be rooting for at any point because it looks like he is someone who he's not afraid to follow his instincts. If he starts playing, I guarantee there's going to be 2 or 3 big plays he makes, and I guarantee there's going to be at least one where he kind of bit on that play action or that fly sweep motion. It was good to feel that connection to the school and the team.
Plus, the Big Ten distributed all that revenue. It was the talk of the stadium. They were buzzing.
Yeah. I've decided that I'm going to start unplugging from some of that part of the sport.
Probably healthy.
Yeah. I'm not going to think about TV deals and what I think should happen. I've decided I'm going to start leaving some of that. It's not that I'm going to ignore it, but I'm not going to try to figure out what should be done. Maybe that's the best way to say it. I'm not going to, what they really need to do is get collective bargaining involved, because the fact is nothing I say about it is going to make any difference. And me thinking that they're stupid isn't going to increase my enjoyment of it. They're going to have some rules. Most people are going to follow the rules. Some are not. And I'm going to kind of take a more of a Zen-like approach to it.
It's probably the right outlook.
Yeah, probably easier to do in May than it's going to be in October too.
Yeah, it'll. Everyone's level-headed till you go to Wisconsin.
Yeah, everybody's got Zen until their football team gets punched in the mouth.
Speaking of Zen, we got Ian this week.
We do have a conversation with IP McFarland. He's checking in. I think the sound quality is great this week.
Excellent.
Good morning, guys. Very sad to hear about Voi Tunuufi. Too young. My sincere regrets to his family, his friends, everybody who's grieving right now. That's terrible. No good segue out. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that you guys have been hired as the co-GMs, or I think it's Director of Player Personnel at the University of Washington. And 2 things have happened. One, the NCAA has passed a rule that the zombie portal is now open, but each team is capped at 1 player. The other thing that has happened is that $1 million has fallen into your lap to spend. You're not going to get a star, but you can probably swing a power 4 starter to come over. What position are you bringing over a power 4 starter to fill for this season? And with the remainder of the money, because I think you'd have a little left, what position room are you giving bonuses to the young players in to ensure that when they don't see the field this year, they don't immediately transfer? I'm going to be in Botswana next week when it's time to record, and I believe I'll be in Zimbabwe the week after that when it's time to record. So I guess first, the gate code to my house is 24601 if anybody wants to steal our lawn furniture. Second, you may need someone else to ask a question, or it's May, maybe cut the episode a little shorter. I wish you guys a good 3 weeks. I'll be back right around Memorial Day. Go Dogs.
Ian advocating for brevity. Never thought I'd see the day.
Well, if that's in one of those pot kettle situations.
Yeah, man, as Ian said, like what a bummer. With Voi's passing, that's I think about that 2023 team especially, and all the stars and the guys who got drafted, and there's a number of guys who also made a ton of plays to make a season like that happen, to win multiple other games, and across the time he was there. And you need a lot of Voi Tunufis, or at least a couple of them, to make those types of years possible too. And I just, with all the star power they had, I don't know that he ever got credit for just what he meant to that team and that season. And the way that his teammates remember him tells you what kind of guy he was. Just super friendly, kind. I mean, we talked to him a handful of times over the 4 years he was at Washington. And I was telling you before we started, like I was going back to find audio of old interviews to use in a story I wrote. And like one of them, I think, was from like a pre-camp media day or something. The first, as soon as you click the audio on, the first thing is my voice saying like, "Oh, doing all right, man. Hey, how are you doing?" Because he was always one to like actually greet you and ask you like, "Hey, how's it going? How you doing?" Like, was just always very happy to be wherever he was and talking to whoever he was talking to. And he played the game the same way. I think it's what made him such a fan favorite. Like he exuded joy, and was such just a very, very happy guy. I know his sister wrote a nice tribute to him on their GoFundMe page that it's been very cool to see how many current, former transfers, NFL guys, you name it, UW football players have donated to that. Just testament to the guy he was.
I thought you wrote a really nice piece on Montlake about sort of the attitude he brought and the eagerness to fit or fill whatever need the team had. And to me, that is one of the essences of college football, is that you have these big rosters, and unlike the NFL, guys bounce around positions a lot. And that does tend to happen. And the frequency and willingness with which he did that really, really speaks to who he was as part of the team and part of a really significant era for the school. It's just heartbreaking. I mean, death is such a hard and difficult thing at any stage in life. Like there's no point where death is easy. It is really heartbreaking when it's young people. A number of guys from teams that I've covered have have passed, and it's I just always feel the same heartbreak about these were people that you imagine having everything out in front of them, and you feel for their family and you feel for their teammates and you just feel for them. It's really sad. My best thoughts go out to his family. Extreme condolences on what is just a world-changing loss, and also to his teammates too. And he was someone who was loved, and the reaction that you see and the sorrow that comes from that speaks to the effect that he had on the people around him.
I think that's well said. 23, just in the, in a car accident, for those who hadn't seen, late Sunday night. I was reading the Seattle Times story about him by Andy Yamashita. It sounds like he was just getting ready to, he was back home in Utah and was just getting ready to start helping out as an assistant coach at a high school there. Just heartbreaking, man. Really feel for his family, for everybody who cared about him. As Ian said, like no easy way to transition out of that, but his question was about how you might allocate resources for which position, if you could only take one guy in the portal, what it would be. I think I know what it would be.
I think I'm going running back. Am I wrong?
So I thought about that, but then I don't know. Like, are we counting the guy? Like, is this in addition to the guys they did get, or is this like if you take just what they had coming out of last year and you can only take one guy from the portal?
True,
who are you replacing?
you're not gonna get a better running back than Jaden Lamar. Like that's
because I'm thinking edge rusher or D tackle. If you've got $1 million,
yeah, you get a pretty good D tackle for $1 million. Is that how would you go? Would you go for the best player or the most important position? And maybe it's a marriage of the two.
I'd go for most important position.
Yeah. So that's probably edge, right?
Yeah, and I'm breaking the spirit of Ian's question. I'm spending all of the money on the acquisition. I don't care about giving bonuses to guys to keep them from leaving. We'll worry about that next cycle.
So I have thought, much to the hypocritical nature of my earlier, that I'm going to stop thinking about these sort of things. If I was running a college football program, I would turn it into not ruthless, but it would be entirely, hey, you ball out and get a huge ton of statistics. If you're great, I'm not going to do the piecemeal. We're going to try to keep you happy while you bide your time. It's going to be like, nope, when you get on the field and you kill it, then you get to eat. that wouldn't guide my recruiting process. Like, I do believe you still have to promise, if you've got a chance to get a top flight player or someone you're really convicted on, someone like Derek Coleman-Broussard or Cody Green, you do it. But I wouldn't be trying to do I'll give a nickel here and a dime there to keep this guy from bailing. I would turn it very much into, like, once you're here, the way you get paid is to play your butt off.
Yeah, I think that's the way they want to do it, really. And it's like, so that's been Washington's philosophy around NIL going back to the early days under Kalen DeBoer. It was like, it's going to be merit-based. It's, we're going to pay guys who perform. And it's like, that is not NIL. Mm-hmm. That's not compensating someone in exchange for their name, image, and likeness. There is, of course, a large overlap between the guys who have the most legitimate NIL value and the guys who produce the most on the field, but not always, right? Not always. Like, some guys are more marketable than others. Some guys might have greater value to your roster because there's like a need, and, it's where that intersection of supply and demand, right? If you have a glaring need for a D tackle, that guy suddenly is more valuable to you than you might be willing to pay your best receiver or whatever. One more thing pointing to like their employees. Like, right, we're gonna you have to produce on the field first. You have to hit certain statistical measurements. Some of these, I don't know how much Washington is doing this, but some of these revenue share contracts even have bonuses built in for statistical achievement. But it's an NIL licensing agreement.
Can you think of other things in sports that have been as sort of obviously a ruse or a cover, where it's not, it's just lip service? Like NIL, I think very firmly ties into the idea that these are marketing contracts is lip service. That is what they're saying. Nobody is under, not the fans, not the coaches, not the players, is under any illusion as to what this is. It is compensation for performance, for playing. Because I haven't been able to find another one. Maybe the old injured list in the NBA, where it used to be that you would have 12 players on the active roster, but you could have 15 there. You just have to declare 3 people injured for the game. You'd have so you could use those 3 spots. But somebody like Mark Pope, who spent years where he was never on the active roster but was never hurt, he just practiced for him. Maybe that's the closest thing I can think of.
Yeah, I mean, maybe something around like the tampering window with NFL free agency.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Right, we're to believe that, these deals were all just reached in the first hour of free agency starting.
So freaking funny. Mark Pope I did a story about him and how much, like, what it was like to have be injured, healthy, the majority of his NBA career. He was great, but he said he wanted to be put on the injured list with chronic dandruff.
By the way, I know we've hit the Ken Walker thing, drawing the line from NFL free agency to college football transfer portal. But I saw he did a podcast, was it Pro Football Talk recently, where he was talking about how, like, it was basically during the season he kind of came to the realization that this was probably it for him in Seattle, that it wasn't going to happen, which I think, not shocking to people, but it did seem even after the Super Bowl that there was at least some hope that the Seahawks might re-sign him or bring him back. I mean, John Schneider was kind of like cracking jokes about it at the parade. Further proof that, like, a guy can acknowledge to himself consciously that he's not going to be playing for this same team next year and not allow that to limit his performance or his effort in any way.
Yeah, I would say that is one of the biggest misconceptions that people have. And you know what? It's as evidenced by Randy Johnson, whose number was retired, or his portion of his number was retired on Saturday, that a lot of people think he tanked that last year that he was in Seattle. And it looks that way because of his
It does look that way.
It looks, but if you look at sort of the deeper statistics, like strikeouts per 9 innings, WHIP, it wasn't as big a fall off as you would think. But even then, that would be one of the examples that I would point to as where it appears that someone would have sort of lost their joie de vivre at the end of their term with the team. But the number one, people that think that that the player needs to be loved to play his best, that he needs to have every need taken care of or be confident in his future with the team, it's not true. There are more instances in which the opposite is true, in which when all of that uncertainty is taken off the table, that sort of that they either relax or there's not the same level of urgency. When you've got a player that's playing for his next contract, you're basically guaranteed to get his utmost effort, even if he believes that contract is not going to come from the team he's playing for.
Anymore, especially at the college level, everybody's auditioning.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
By the way, I know we'll touch on this. I'm going to write about this, but to touch on this briefly, it seems like 5-for-5 eligibility is going to happen.
I think that's a good step. I think that's a good step.
Yeah. It's what Chris Peterson clamored for forever. He's not the only one, but I can distinctly recall him when they changed, before this even, but when they changed the redshirt rule going into, I think, the 2018 season to say, like, okay, they can play in 4 games now in redshirt. He was very much like, why bother? Why make everyone do math? Why not just give everyone 5 years of eligibility? you've taken it this far, you're allowing them to play in a third of a season. And so for those who haven't seen, like, the rule would be very simply from the time you graduate from high school, or crucially from the time you turn 19, whichever happens first, which for the overwhelming majority of athletes is going to be high school graduation. But they're also saying from age 19 to keep guys from, for whatever reason, if you don't enroll in college and then you're 21 years old and you start playing college sports, you don't get 5 years from then. You get 5 years from when you turned 19 or graduated from high school. You just get 5 seasons. So if you're Derek Coleman Brusa and not Cody Green, obviously Washington does not expect to have either of those guys for 5 years. I think the hope is that you only have them for 3 because they're that good and they go to the pros. Those guys would get to basically play every single game for 5 years. You're right. If you're a day one starter as a freshman, that means you get 5 years of eligibility. There would be no more redshirting. Like, redshirting would just not be a thing anymore. This is not passed, by the way. Just want to make that clear again. Like, this, it's being discussed, and materials have been sent to schools about, like, hey, here's how it would work. But it hasn't gone into effect yet. It does sound like they're targeting, though, the fall of 2026 to put it into effect. So guys who are true seniors this year, a Landon Hatchett, a Jacob Lane, an X-Ray Alexander, Jaden Lamar. There's one other I'm forgetting on Washington, but you get the point, right? Guys who are going into their 4th year in college in 2026 did not redshirt and will be seniors. If this goes into effect, players in that situation would then get another year of eligibility, would get a 5th year of eligibility. So something for those guys to consider after the 2026 season going into 2027. Do you feel like you're better off entering the draft, going through that process, and trying to make a roster and getting paid as an NFL player? Do you think your value from an NIL perspective might be greater to your college team or to another college team if you want to transfer, coming back to play a 5th year? So that's going to be a question a lot of guys are going to have to answer for themselves. Jed Fish made reference to this on Friday night. I don't know if you watched his press conference or not, but he was talking about Damon Williams Jr. and his progression, and he was like, well, like 5 for 5 passes, he could play 3 more seasons here. He could play this year and he could have 2 more. And so, hey, forget about, is he going to be back in 2027? Like, Jed Fish is making reference to, hey, well, there's no reason why he couldn't be here through 2028.
It will be we have yet to see it happen where I'm convinced that a player goes back to college because he's earning more money than he would get in the NFL. I'm talking about a 1st round pick. We have yet to see a situation where I think that has happened, and specifically at quarterback. It's not far-fetched, though. It's not, and we're getting closer. And with someone like Damon Williams, who his draft stock, I'm not going to say that it's not like it's a sure thing he would be a 1st round pick. I feel like that's kind of redundant to even say, because I think most people probably would not project him as a 1st round pick, but I don't want to rule that out either. The barrier that used to be there for shorter quarterbacks isn't anymore. But that idea, it's not off the table that you could see a guy who is projected to be a pretty high end pick, or even a 2nd or 3rd round pick, that decides, like, I'm going to stay. Yeah. It's although we did see that with the LSU quarterback, Nussmeier. Who knows what happens if he enters the draft a year ago? But I remember sitting there watching Brian Kelly talking to his agent, who also represented the quarterback on what was the All Access? Was it Prime Video that did the All Access SEC?
Yeah, whatever that
thing?
SEC show was.
And like, they were talking about him being a 3rd round pick. Like, that is a cautionary tale too, that going back to school, even when you're getting a huge payday, it can have a negative effect on your draft stock as well.
I'm thinking there's a healthy enough cross-section of guys who, like, if they're getting honest advice, their ceiling is probably day 3, if that, who still are like plus contributors, college starters.
Yes.
Who might be worth, I mean, certainly 6 figures and maybe $500,000.
Yes.
To their college team. And so the decision is between, like, do I want to, like, roll the dice and work my tail off and hope to be a 4th round pick, a 5th round pick, maybe even an undrafted free agent, maybe have a ceiling as a practice squad player, which, what's that worth? $250,000 now. That's, good work if you can get it. Or do I want to extract as much value as I can out of my college days? I got another year here. I can come back. I can be the man again at my position, getting paid really well. And who's to say I won't have the same NFL fortunes a year from now, but I just got to spend another year being in a really good college program, getting all the benefit you get from that, running it back with my friends. Probably not having to go to a whole lot of class as a fifth-year college player. Like, I could see a lot of guys choosing that path over. I mean, everybody wants to play in the NFL. Like, if you get good advice that says your best chance of having the best NFL future is to go now, then, like, regardless of what your projection is, that's, some guys will make that decision. But I do think you're going to see, like, a decent cross-section of guys who are like, making $400,000 to play another year of college football and be, like, one of the best players on my team for a good team and like have that experience sounds a lot better than, kind of entering the meat market and hoping that I can be a practice squad guy somewhere, or hoping that I can be the 53rd guy on a roster, or, a backup or special teams guy, whatever. Like I'm fine with that if that's my future, but why not put it off another year while getting paid a ton of money and probably having more fun?
Yeah. As we were talking about this, I was thinking about Dante Moore, because I do think that Dante Moore probably would have been a first-round pick. But for him and for any quarterback, there is a decision too. Are you at your best? Are you ready? Because once you do enter the NFL as a quarterback who's drafted in the first round, it's a lot of pressure. And I don't think it was purely that Dante Moore was coming back because he thought he would earn more money, or because of I think it was hey, another year in this system. I've only had one full year as a starter here. His college career, I mean, he'd had 1 year that didn't go well, 1 year that he didn't play, was a backup, then 1 year where it was really a breakout year. If he decided to come back after this season, then I think you would look at it and say, like, that's an example of someone who's like, okay, I'm happier making this much money as a college football player, and I'm willing to wait on whatever that means for what I earn in the NFL.
And if he did, between last year, this season, and the 2027 season, he would leave college with enough money to do whatever he wanted for the rest of his life.
It's a very fair point.
Just saying.
You're getting very close to the point where people are talking about guys taking pay cuts to go to the NFL. It's not entirely, that's a slightly disingenuous framing, because with rookie salary caps or with rookie wage scale, you can't just count on the money, like what you're making in your first, like as your salary. It's also, you're getting a year closer. You're a year younger when you would become an unrestricted free agent, which is a huge earning potential. But you're getting closer to where those are going to be. The financial aspect is, the financial discrepancy is not nearly as great as it used to be.
Don't you also get a big chunk of that up front as a signing bonus?
It does come as a signing bonus, like you do.
So that's the other thing. Like, the average annual value is one thing, but like the money in your pocket today, signing 100%. That contract is enormous.
And that's where, like, the framing can be disingenuous when people are like, "Oh, you take a pay cut to do this." It's okay. Like, yes, that's not a lie. That's not wrong. It's not altogether an accurate characterization of how the finances in the sport work, because of the signing bonuses and because of that question of, if you put off entering the NFL a year, you're delaying by a year when you become an unrestricted free agent, and you're essentially giving away one of your prime earning years. But all of that's moot if you're not prepared to stick in the NFL. Like that, the primary decision, or the primary motivating factor for any player who's deciding whether they should come out while they still have college eligibility is, am I ready to play and stick in the NFL right now?
The other thing to note with the 5-for-5, the potential 5-for-5 legislation, is that not only would this do away with redshirting, but it would do away with like all redshirting. So you got 5 years of eligibility, period. you tear your ACL, you miss a whole year. Like, that does not mean you can apply for a waiver to get another year like you have been for the last, however many decades. Like, no, that you get 5 years. Like, if you miss one of your 5 years due to injury, sorry, that's it. Like, so this will be challenged in court
constantly. And then there's going to be the sad cases that come of like, he suffered a second knee injury right before his senior year. Come on, give him one more. It'll be interesting to see how hardline the NCAA will be, and then what happens when it's challenged in court.
I think there are very, very narrow exceptions. So it's maternity leave, military service, or religious missions are basically the only like acceptable waiver pathways. You can't. There's no like hardship waiver anymore, or wouldn't be if this gets passed. It's and that like the whole point is to to prevent players from playing college sports into their mid-20s or whatever. Like they're trying to keep college sports limited to college aged people for whatever reason. I feel like I read something that said the NCAA is they want this referred to only as their age-based eligibility rule rather than 5 and 5, which I'm not really sure why.
It's marketing, man. It's important to set it. It's important to set it 5 for 5, age-based. Age-based is much better.
I don't know if that's like to appease the president and the whole executive order thing about, because that like the 5 for 5 eligibility is very much a part of that, right? Like Tommy Tuberville had been championing that. So I think it will be a good framework, at least for the sport, that obviously will be challenged in court, and we'll see how those court challenges go. But I think it's helpful in the interim, at least for Washington and other schools, to be able to look at their roster and say, oh, well, here we have this many true juniors who, suddenly now we can start to think about maybe them being on the roster an additional year. And, a guy like Landon Hatchett, a guy like Jacob Lane, a guy like X-Ray Alexander can start to think about, if this does go into effect, like, hey, maybe it might make sense to play another college year in 2027. So we'll have to see how that goes. I'm eager to see if Ian might figure out a way to get us a question
from Africa
next week's episode from his vacation.
Botswana was the first one.
That's his challenge. The gauntlet's been thrown down.
Ian, enjoy your trip.
We'll talk to you next week.
Peace.